Hi, and welcome to the Real Estate Mastermind, a podcast program geared to dissecting the real estate industry in Ghana, Africa, and beyond. I am your regular host, Chris Nii. Stay tuned as we bring to you another exciting episode in our journey to broaden our knowledge in one of the fastest growing industries in the world today. On today's episode, we have with us Kwame Ankapong Yeboah. Kwame is a dedicated expert who takes pride in the professional quality of his work. He holds a BSc in Land Economy and an MBA Project Management and a professional member of the Ghana Institution of Surveyors, GHIS. Kwame's over 10 years work experience spans across land administration, valuation, real estate negotiations, due diligence, and project management. His professional career includes having worked at institutions such as Lands Commission, HFC Bank, and the Ghana Airports Company Limited. Hi, and welcome to the second episode of the Real Estate Mastermind Africa podcast. We have with us Kwame Ankapong Yeboah. So Kwame, I hear when it comes to real estate and professional, property investment analysis, land acquisition and development, valuation of land and buildings for all purposes, land tenure studies and policy advisory services, land administration, land law and conveyance, project management. Oh, my brother. I hear you are the one I should just talk to you about. Thank you, and you're welcome to the Real Estate Mastermind podcast with me, Chris Nii.
Thank you, Nii, for having me.
It's a pleasure. I know you are very, very busy, and having to drag you here was not an easy job at all. But I'm always, going through my mind about lands and its, issues. And today's topic being buying lands in Ghana. I think that if we want to do a proper, dissecting of it, I know one episode will not be enough. So I promise my listeners that we will do an extension of it. So this will be in 2 episodes. The first episode talking about the details of lands. And the other one, would also continue with that. But I want to start with a very simple question. What is land, itself, and what are the type of lands that we have or title interests that we have in lands, specifically in Ghana?
Thank you, Nii. When we say land simply is the mass, the solid mass we see with our eyes, the soil, the earth, we see anything underneath it and also above it. And under the laws of Ghana, there are various types of land. We basically have 2 types, which are the public lands and the customary lands. Under the public lands, we have the state lands and the vested lands. State lands, simply put, are those lands that the government has acquired through its powers of eminent domain. And the law requires that for government to acquire any land, it must pay prompt, fair, and adequate compensation to whoever's land was taken from them. The vested lands, on the other hand, are those lands that are vested in the government, which means government takes control of this land and doesn't pay compensation for, not because they are not supposed to pay, but in cases such as conflict cases, government can step in and say, okay, till we resolve the issues that is creating the conflict, I'm vesting this land in myself. So if you take Alabanyo and Konya, for instance, it's appropriate that the government steps in and says, we are vesting this land. The government is not really ready to pay compensation for that land. But to bring about sanity and peace, government can place its hand on that particular parcel of land and manage it and use the revenues to benefit the people. You also have cases where if, say, we find mineral, like gold in some parcel of land, it automatically vests in the government. And for this matter, the president of the country. For the customary lands, we have the family lands, we have the stew lands, we also have the skin lands, as is the case in the north. So basically, those are the types of lands we have in Ghana. And drawing from these types of land, there are various interests, legal interests, that an individual or a group can hold in whichever particular type of land it is. Of course, the public lands are those managed by the government through the Lands Commission. The critical part is the customary lands, where you have the various interests such as the allodial, the freehold, the customary freehold. You also have the leasehold interest, which can be given both in the public lands and the customary lands. You have other lesser interests such as licenses, subleases, and the likes.
Wow, that is really in depth. So this is me asking. So when you say allodial ownership and title, what does it really entail? Assuming somebody comes, I have an allodial title. What is it?
Thank you, Nii. With the allodial, it's the absolute estate of inheritance that can be held over any parcel of land.
Okay.
So in our case, the allodial interest usually lies in the stool or the state or the family or the skin which owns that particular parcel of land. Underneath the allodial, especially in the customary setup, we have what we call the usufruct or the customary freeholder. These are subjects of, let me use two to represent the customary leadership. The subjects of the land get to use the land for their benefit, because the stool is an embodiment of the particular customary area. And then the individuals who atone tenancy to the stool are allowed to use the land for farming, for development, whatever purpose, so long as it is permitted. That is the customary freehold. And then, for lack of a better expression, modern times, or under the common law system, we've sort of adopted the leasehold system as well. The leasehold is simply using right over land for a specific period. But even sticking with the customary landholding tenure system, there's this other lesser interest, especially in the Akan areas, called the Ebunu and Ebusa interest. This basically is sort of a use right where a non-indigent, a non-subject of a particular customary holding area comes in, talks to a usufruct, a customary freeholder, that, you have all this parcel of land, you are not able to farm it. I want to enter an arrangement with you where I will do the farming, and then upon, let's say I have 100 acres of land, I'm the customary freeholder. Some stranger comes into the land and says, I have the strength, I have the machinery, the capacity to work on this parcel of land for you. I'll be able to farm the 100 acres for you in, say, 5 years. Then we come to an arrangement that, you are doing cash crops for me. You are supposed to farm this 100 acres within 5 years. If you do that, we'll split the farm into two. That becomes the Ebunu, meaning breaking into two. And it usually works for the cash crops, these economic crops. And for the Ebusa, is mostly an arrangement where the proceeds are broken into three, where the farmer takes 2/3 and then the landowner takes 1/3 of whatever product they make out of the farm.
I'm told that allodial interest or the title holder is the highest, interest you can ever hold. How true is that?
Yes. Allodial interest is, as I said, the absolute.
Okay.
It is the umbrella. All others fall under the allodial.
Okay.
And it's such that it's hardly extinguished.
Okay.
Unlike the leasehold, which will come to a specific end.
Okay.
Based on whatever the agreement was.
Right.
Even the freehold could come to an end.
Okay.
Because if you have a lineage, a family, and all members of that family pass away, and there's nobody to inherit, then the interest is virtually gone.
Okay.
So everything sort of reverts
back
to the allodial.
Now, try and break this down for my listeners. Freehold and leasehold. How do you distinguish this clearly? I mean, myself, sometimes I have it difficult trying to explain to people. What would you say is a freehold and what would you say is a leasehold?
Right. The freehold interest is an interest that really never extinguishes. Okay. It never runs out. It goes on forever and never and never. Okay. So long as there's somebody to inherit or to convey to. Okay. The leasehold, on the other hand, has a specific commencement and a specific end. Okay. So in practice, usually if you buy land in Ghana these days, 99 years. Yeah. It's not the law. Mm-hmm. It could even be 70 years. It could be 50 years. It could even be 25 years. It could also be 200 years.
So there's no law that says it has to be 99.
None that I am aware of.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. So again,
and I would love to see such a law because TDC for Tema Development Corporation was given about 125 years. Okay. Are we saying that interest is invalid?
No, to its
for Tema, the whole of Tema.
So if you buy something from Tema, you're giving 125-year lease.
No, the state when the state acquired the land for Tema Development.
Okay. You mean that the whole project
corporation TDC was handed the entire parcel of land, as we know as Tema, to develop and manage it. And the lease that was given to the corporation was about 125 years. I think from 1956 or so, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Okay. So, as far as I'm concerned, leasehold
can extend more than...
It could even be 300, 500 years.
Okay.
What makes it a leasehold is there's a specific commencement and a specific end date.
Okay.
Unlike the leasehold, which says you have it forever.
This is new to me. I always see 99 years plus extra 45 renewal. I mean, it's become a norm now. You're saying there's no law that's, specific. I thought it was a cap for 100, so people would now opt for 99 and add extra 45 renewal.
Like I said, Nii, I am not aware of any law. The only law I know that limits any interest in land is what the Constitution says about a non-Ghanaian. Okay. A non-Ghanaian cannot hold an interest of more than 50 years.
Interesting. Now that's my next question to you. As to a foreigner coming in, you cannot own land in Ghana for more than 50 years and above. It's a law.
Yes.
So if anybody gives you land above that, I mean, it's almost invalid.
It's invalid. In the Constitution, I think in Article 266, yes, which talks about ownership of land by non-citizens. It says that no interest in any land in Ghana shall be created which vests in a person who is not a citizen of Ghana a freehold interest in any land in Ghana. Okay. And then it goes on further to say that the non-citizens who had a freehold interest before 1969, the law converted all those interests to a 50-year lease at a peppercorn rent, commencing from 2nd August or so, 1969.
Interesting.
So next year should, I think, 1969 till 2019, that's about 50 years.
I can calculate that.
A lot of interests are actually going to expire. And those will be very interesting times for land administration in Ghana.
Interesting. This is a serious,
Yes,
serious.
it's
I've
in the Constitution, chapter 21 of the Constitution, 266.
Wow.
I think if you read that.
So you're saying that a non-Ghanaian cannot acquire a land for more than 50 years.
Right.
The limit that he's supposed
The
to
limit is
50 years.
yes,
So, but I see people also come into partnership with a Ghanaian to form a company. And you mean a company that owns land can get more than 50?
It's a company.
Okay. So that's a different...
Registered under the laws of Ghana.
Okay.
I think our lawyers will be the best people to explain, but I believe once it's a business, the law says a non-Ghanaian.
Ghanaian, right. Okay. So, I mean, this is, like we said, it's a more legal... I think I'll have to promise my listeners on having to bring a lawyer to dissect this particular, freehold and leasehold. Before we leave that topic, the leasehold, you say, it's not a specific 99, but then also when people give you that interest, they are supposed to have an extended number of years. So they'll tell you, okay, I'm giving you for 70 years plus an extra renewal of so and so year. So when that 70 or 99 elapses, what do you have to do? Does the land go back to the allodial person, or you have to go back to renegotiate? Are you paying rent, or you are paying for the land back again?
Well, I think your question could be broken down into various issues.
Okay.
You mentioned some of the clauses that give you a further renewal.
Yeah.
Depending on how the wording is put.
Okay.
If it says it's an automatic renewal for a further whatever period, then automatically it renews.
Okay.
But taking it on the face of it, if your lease is for 100 years and the 100 years expires, technically everything reverts to your grantor,
Okay.
together with the developments you've made on it. Because really you cannot separate the development
from the land.
Anything.
So what do you do? You go back to them to renegotiate?
Exactly.
And are you paying ground rent, or you're paying for the land back again?
So when you are acquiring land, it's a negotiation.
Okay.
It's a negotiation. Issues you negotiate on are the price,
Okay.
the term, or the period for which the land is being given to you. So if I'm selling my land 100 cedis for 50-year lease, if you come and you think the 100 cedis is too much, nothing stops you from bargaining to say, oh,
This how much
I can pay so much.
Okay.
I'll pay 80 cedis for the 50 years.
Okay.
Or even, okay, I'll give you the 100 cedis, but I want 75 years.
Okay.
It's a negotiation.
All right.
Once you agree, then you are good to go. However, in this particular case, when the lease expires, it's still further negotiations you do. Probably you took the bare land and you've made a lot of improvements to it. You've actually added value. So all these things are taken into consideration
Right.
in negotiating for the new lease.
But so is it legal to buy a freehold now? Because I was told that it's illegal to sell a freehold to someone at the moment. So all the lands are supposed to be sold with leaseholds, and the maximum year you can go is 99. Now you're telling me the 99 is not capped. It's something that we have just found a way around, and given to people as subleases on those, plus the extra renewal that we are saying. So is it possible to have a freehold as at now?
Good question, Chris. It's possible. Again, going back to the Constitution. The Constitution says no stool shall create a freehold interest.
Okay.
And there's a popular case. There's a popular case which somebody acquired land from a family. The family holds the allodial interest.
Okay.
The person acquired a freehold interest from the family. Tried registering at the Lands Commission. The Lands Commission says, the law says you cannot hold a freehold interest. They went to court, and the court held that the Constitution mentioned stool land and not family land, and gave the go-ahead for the person to be able to register.
Interesting.
So family lands are able to grant freeholds.
But stool lands?
The law as it stands now says stool lands. I personally have a lot of disagreements with that interpretation of the law. Because I think probably the framers of the law use the term stool land to represent the customary land. But hey, the court has decided, and there's very little we can do
about it.
The reason why people are not giving freeholds to is because now land is very valuable.
Yes.
So why? And there's a common parlance in land administration that land is for the dead, the living, and the unborn. So why should we...
No, pick that again. The land is for
the dead,
the
living,
and
the unborn.
Okay.
So why should the living today sort of... when we mention freehold, immediately it's like selling off the allodial interest, which I don't believe is the case. A freehold is just like a leasehold without limits. But you still atone tenancy to the allodial interest. So to avoid cases where some non-indigents get to take over control over your lands, that's why we have this leasehold system. People are growing wiser. We don't want what happened in Zimbabwe to be happening in our part of the world. If you remember the case of Zimbabwe, the president had to use force and unorthodox methods to take back lands.
And it's happening in South Africa at the moment.
Exactly. So it's to avoid some of all these things. And also we know the economic value of land now. So when you give the leasehold, it allows you to generate revenue in the future for
the upcoming generation.
The generation at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's go back to the basic document you get when you buy a land. What we call an indenture, of which people call the lease or the lease document. What's an indenture?
An indenture, I like to put things very simply. An indenture is an instrument of writing containing the contract between the parties transacting over the land. So between the grantor and the grantee, or the purchaser and the buyer, the seller and the purchaser. So it's simply that document which contains all the
agreement, a piece of an
instrument of writing that contains the conveyance or the transfer, whatever terms and conditions there are to the land.
So then where does sublease and all these other things come in?
Great.
And you mentioned conveyance as well. If there's lease, there's conveyance, there's deed, there's all these words that we are using. If you can just help my listeners out, because I don't want to talk much on the show. You are the lands person. I want you to educate us.
The umbrella interest is there. The stool, the state, whoever leases the land to you.
So that's a lease. The first point is a lease.
A lease, an assignment, a gift, a sublease, a license. They are all conveyances. Conveyance is, again, simply the transfer of title to land by one or more persons to another. So the transfer is what we call the conveyance. However, there's this misconception people use the term conveyance to represent or as synonymous to granting a freehold. That's wrong. A freehold, a leasehold, a sublease, they are all forms of conveyance. Conveyance is simply the transfer. From A to B over land. Now to your question about the sublease. For instance, I'm giving a 99-year lease. I develop the land within say 5 years. That leaves 94 years, right? Somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, you have a lot of land. Can you sell a portion to me?" I feel, oh, the laws allow it, so why not? I can still make some money. Now, after 5 years, the value has appreciated. So, I have 94 years remaining. I decide to give you 75 years out of my 94. I, having the 94 years remaining, cannot give you anything more than that. It's immediately invalid. But I'm allowed to give you even up to less than a day.
So that's what they call the residual interest or the residual, number of years left. That's what will be conveyed.
Exactly. So the remaining 94 years, if I give you anything short of the entire 94, that is a sublease. If I give everything remaining to you, that's an assignment.
Interesting.
So an assignment is simply washing off entirely my hands off my interest in the property, that take everything. So now you deal directly with my grantor.
You don't have to come to me. I'm done.
I will not be in the picture anymore.
Okay.
I will not be in the picture anymore. But with a sublease, I can give you 75 years
out of the remaining.
Out of the
94,
whatever is remaining. So you deal directly with me, and my grantor will have no business dealing with you.
Right. I get
Those are the economics of owning land.
Okay. Now, and that's perfect. I mean, myself, I'm learning a lot of all the technical things that has to do with the names and the technical words that will be used in the land purchase. But so if I get an indenture, what am I supposed to look out for in the indenture to make it a valid indenture? As a buyer.
Right. The indenture or the lease document, even if it's a freehold, it's supposed to contain details of the parties in the transaction. So the grantor and the grantee, or the buyer and the seller, putting it simply.
So I see assignee and assignor. They're just words, the people, or they have technical meanings of all these things.
Like I mentioned to you, if I have a freehold interest, a leasehold interest, whatever interest, and I decide to give everything entirely to another party, that's an assignment. So that's where you see the words assignee and assignor. If it's a sublease, you see the sublessor, sublessee. If it's a lease, you see the lessor and the lessee. You get it?
I get that.
So back to your question.
The components of an indenture.
The document, yes. The parties involved, the price or the consideration, whatever amount was exchanged for the land, a description of the parcel of land with a site plan. Of course, the description will come with a site plan. And also the parties must sign the document to make it valid. There are also other terms and conditions that may be included in the indenture. These could include the ground rent payable. It could include clauses such as you're supposed to develop within a particular period. You're even supposed to develop a certain standard of property. So in areas where everybody is looking at having a development of a minimum of, say, a million Ghana cedis, it could be put as a covenant or a term and a condition in the indenture.
Okay.
It could also include conditions such as seeking the consent of the grantor before you convey
To someone
to
else.
another
Okay.
party.
Okay.
So either before you mortgage, before you assign, before you sublease, all these conditions could be put in the indenture.
So when I pick an indenture, so okay, I see a first page that has a narration of who is giving what to someone, and then I come to a part where you have the schedule, and then I have a part where you are saying they have the all the agreements and the considerations. I have a part also that has to do with oath of proof, and I'm seeing some register of lands, and then the site plan has to be in it.
Yeah.
Telling what demarcations.
Exactly.
Now here we have to sign at the back of the site plan. The grantor has to sign. It's part of the things that Land Commission is looking out for.
It's not now. That's the best practice, because you don't want the situation where somebody goes to change
The site plan.
the site plan.
Okay.
So both parties agree that indeed this site plan
Is what?
is an indication of the actual parcel of land. So we both endorse it at the back. It's like signing any contract. You try to initial each page aside the final signatures you put in,
Okay.
just so nobody pulls out anything
Okay.
out of mischief.
Okay.
So to avoid all those things, is good practice. The parties involved in the transaction sign at the back of the site,
Right.
and in fact sign initial each other page,
Okay.
so it's not easily changed, because it's land document. Land
And
is
it's a
life,
legal,
and it's a legal document. It's actually supposed to be even prepared by a lawyer. That's why almost every indenture must be stamped
by a
by
solicitor.
the lawyer.
Okay. So, just and listeners, this is just a way of education. The first part, has to do with the narration and, the source. You have to look out for the schedule, which is telling you how the land is delineated, south, so and so. You see south something and north something and blah blah
Exactly.
blah. But the schedule. Then you have a part the part that shows the site plan. Then you have a part that has the signatures of the parties. Then you have to also look out for the oath of proof. Then the coast register of land.
Registrar of court, the court
Yeah.
endorses it.
So hey there, join us in our next episode as we delve into another exciting topic in our real estate journey, what we call Real Estate Mastermind. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button on your Apple podcast or wherever you listen to your podcast.
This podcast was brought to you by CBC Properties. CBC Properties is a registered property brokerage company. It is a fast-growing property management, property leasing, property sales, property development, and property consulting firm based in Ghana, with the vision of offering its services across Africa. We also offer marketing services of large pieces of undeveloped land for commercial and residential purposes, void of litigation. We have available registered land, carefully planned and zoned for mixed use at various locations across Ghana, with a large portion in the Greater Accra region. Log on to www.cbcghana.com for more information. CBC Properties, your property bank.